today we are looking at psychoanalytical theory of Sigmund Freud in counseling theories. So the first item out of about 7 items that we want to talk about in regard to Sigmund Freud in his theories of counseling, we tackle his psychoanalytical theory. Of course, as you note, our friend Andra will tackle individual psychology as part of counseling theories. That's why I told you there are many ways of tackling the subject, counseling theories. We are trying to give you all dimensions of tackling it. What we have done is okay. What we are doing is okay. So let me say that psychoanalytical theory has Sigmund Freud as the founder. Now, he talks about his view of human nature, which we shall consider in more at the introductory level when we come to psychology itself in 50 minutes time. After we are done with this, we shall look at human nature, but in a general perspective. But here we are looking at human nature from the perspective of Sigmund Freud. So Sigmund Freud's view of human nature is considered to be dynamic, meaning that there is an exchange of energy and transformation. Freud used the term catharsis to describe the release of this energy. Freud saw the personality as composed of a conscious mind, a preconscious mind, and unconscious mind. The conscious mind has a knowledge of what is happening in the present, and the preconscious mind contains information from both the unconscious and the conscious mind. The conscious mind contains hidden or forgotten memories or experiences. So you see the personality in Sigmund Freud's understanding is a unique one. He sees it uniquely. There is a sense in which we are not conscious of ourselves, and there is also a sense in which we are very, very conscious. So that is the way he looks at the personality. And we're looking at the structure of personality. Sigmund Freud has 3 parts, sees it from 3 parts. We could have considered it elsewhere, particularly in psychology, but we are looking at it here as an item in counseling psychology. So the 3 parts are the id, the ego, and the superego. Now the id is present at birth and is part of the unconscious. The id is the site of the pressure principle, the tendency of an individual to move toward pressure and away from pain. The id does not have a sense of right or wrong, is impulsive, and is not rational. You know, insects are impulsive, not rational. And so at the level of id, Sigmund Freud says it is impulsive, not rational, not thinking, not calculating. Rather, it is the impulse that works. It contains the most basic of human instincts, human drives, and genetic endowments. The ego is the second system to develop, and it functions primarily in the conscious mind and in the preconscious mind. It serves as a moderator between the id and the superego, controlling wishes and desires. The ego is a site of the reality principle, the ability to interact with the outside world with the appropriate goals and activities. The superego sets the ideal standards and morals for the individual. The superego operates on the moral principle, which rewards the individual for following parental and societal dictates. Guilty is produced when a person violates the ideal ego, denying or ignoring the rules of the superego. So if you have been very keen now from the two sets of courses that we are taking this semester, we have repeated the ego, the id, the ego, and the superego. Although Sigmund Freud's psychology, psychoanalytic theology, or psychoanalysis, what we call psychoanalysis, has been disputed by so many people, particularly when he delves on the sexual matters. People have disagreed with his approach to sexuality. But when it comes to the id, the ego, and the superego, this has little, if any, controversy. So the ego is the second system to develop, and it functions primarily in the conscious mind. Or the id is the site of the pressure principle, the tendency of an individual to move toward pressure and away from pain. And so you can see the bit that these characters are displaying. I'm trying to check out on where the noise is coming from so that I mute. Now, the third section in Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theory is the developmental stage. The developmental stage. And the first stage is oral stage, which is centered on the mouth as a source of pressure. There is anal stage, which is centered on the anus and elimination as a source of pressure. So you note the man will always bring his own controversies. You do not expect to see Sigmund Freud free from controversies. Today we were barring, Honorable Karembe Dire? I was watching it and speakers were saying, we cannot avoid controversies when barring Karembe Dire, Honorable Karembe Dire. He was a controversial politician. For us today, we cannot avoid controversies when we are talking about Sigmund Freud, the psychologist, and psychoanalyst, if you want to be very specific. Because you see, even this oral stage, which is more of an area that is controversial, you can see you can't escape it. The anal stage, the phallic stage. And even when you come to Sigmund Freud's way of looking at intelligence and connect it with the sexuality, the more you have a lot of concern in that line or along that line, you are more intelligent. That is him. And the other things that are a bit controversial, when even his own students almost told him off, like Kao Jung, he told him, my teacher, you are wrong. You say religion is neurotic. No, my teacher, you are wrong. Can't agree with you. So you see, those are controversies. So you can see the oral stage is centered on the mouth as a source of pressure. Anal stage is centered on the anus and elimination as a source of pressure. You know, elimination, that's something to underline. Phallic stage is centered on the genitals and sexual identification as a source of pressure. Now, these controversies now come. Oedipus complex and erector complex. Okay? Oedipus complex is described as the process whereby a boy desires his mother and fears castration from the father in order to create an array of the father. The male runs traditional male roles. Of course, that is too controversial. Number two, erector complex is described in a similar but less clearly resolved in the female child with a desire for the father. Competition with the mother and thus runs the traditional female roles. So that one is a very controversial one. Latent stage is a time of little sexual interest in Sigmund Freud's developmental view. And this stage is characterized with peer activities, academic and social learning, and development of physical skills. There is also genital stage, which begins with the onset of puberty. If the other stages have been successfully negotiated, the young person will take an interest in and establish sexual relationships. So the most controversial bit is this number 3, the developmental stages in Sigmund Freud. So you can raise your objections or comments later. The other one is ego defense now. Number 4, ego defense mechanisms. There are many. This one we don't seem to disagree. This one believed by Freud to protect the individual from being overwhelmed by anxiety. He considered them normal and operating on the unconscious level. Some of the ones most often referred to are as follows: repression, projection, reaction formation, displacement, sublimation, regression, rationalization, denial of reality, and identification. We'll come back to them one by one and try to check on what could be the issue. I'm trying to unmute, to mute rather. I'm struggling to mute so that to keep the noise far from us. I don't know why I'm failing. I don't know what to do. Let me try. Yes, let me use the critical thinking we are talking about. No, I want to mute so that we don't have any disturbance. Let me mute another one. Yeah, I think I've done it. There was only one that needed muting, so it has taken some time. Okay, fine. Otherwise, we'll continue. Otherwise, Sigmund Freud is not an ordinary man or ordinary scholar. He's a man that will keep us busy. So coming back to repression, it is a defense mechanism whereby the ego excludes any painful or undesirable thoughts, memories, feelings, or impulses. So that is it. So that is, and then the projection is a defense mechanism whereby the individual assigns their own undesirable emotions and characteristics to another individual. So it's a question of you want to blame other people, and you want to come emotionally, and sometimes you want to pass back to these other characters or this other person. Okay, you really want to show the problem was not you, or the people wanatuonea, they are not for us, or when they make this comment, it is meant to attack us or to demean us or something. Those are all projections. There is also a reaction formation as a defense mechanism in Sigmund Freud. And reaction formation is a defense mechanism whereby the individual expresses the opposite emotion, feeling, or impulse than that which causes anxiety. It is like inferiority complex, where you express yourself in superiority. I'm big when I mean I'm small. So it is in the reaction formation, the individual expresses the opposite emotion. Okay, you are showing happiness when you actually are not happy. You are showing sadness when actually you are happy. It is a disorder in psychology, and Sigmund Freud called it reaction formation. There is also displacement, and defense mechanism whereby the energy that is generated towards a potentially dangerous or inappropriate target is refocused to a safe target. It's like when there's a quarrel in the family, at the family level, the father quarrels the mother, and then the mother quarrels children, and the children start, hitting and throwing everything at the cat, the dog, the pets. You displace, you put the burden to this other one. Yeah, it is that energy is generated toward a potentially inappropriate target. It's an inappropriate targeting. That's why you are displacing it. You are not putting it at the right place. So it's a displacement. Yeah, yes, yeah. It can. Somebody can be bitter. The judges can be bitter. The executive can be bitter. We can be, doing things out of displacement. There is also sublimation. It's a positive displacement whereby the frustrating target is replaced with a positive target. Yeah, so sublimation is, in Sigmund Freud way of looking at it, is a better thing, because you may look at the target, you may get the positive target, rather than blaming the quarrel at home because there's no sugar, there's no tea, there's no what. You quarrel the wife, or the wife quarrels the husband. You can accept the reality. COVID-19 has placed this country at its lowest economic ebb, at the lowest ebb in its economic discourses, or in its position economically. There is also regression. It is a defense mechanism whereby returns to an earlier stage of development, where you return to an earlier stage of development. So you regress, okay? You want to go back where you started rather than moving forward. Yeah, sometimes when we are in trouble, we cry to our parents, those who brought us up. But at the same time, we can move forward rather than thinking the earlier initial stages where we came from provide the solution. There is also rationalization, which is a defense mechanism in which an individual creates a sensible explanation for an illogical or unacceptable behavior, making it appear sensible or acceptable. While denial is a mechanism whereby an individual does not acknowledge an event or situation that may be unpleasant or traumatic. So denial is too common, by the way. People don't want to face reality. In the post, I heard somebody in the morning in the one of the television stations saying that rather than making a budget of 3.6 trillion, we could, as a country, we needed a budget of 2.4 billion. And tell people, you see, COVID has taken this far. Otherwise, he thought we are adding insult to an injury. When things are bad, that's a time when we are not able to collect beyond 1.6 billion in revenue annually. We are raising the budget to 3.6. Who will pay the balance? That means we'll go back to borrowing. All the same, I still have a feeling that the managers of this country, economic managers, the Minister for Finance, and the team, they know what they are doing. But the point I wanted to make is that we may fail to acknowledge, to accept we could be denialist as a country. That's what we need to find out. Because you cut the cloth, your cloth according to your size. You don't cut your cloth according to what you want. In this world, everybody wants good life, good things. Sometimes you may not have it. And the most psychologically acceptable way is not to deny the reality, but to accept the reality and cut your clothes according to your size, or live within your means. Otherwise, there are many things you may cut. You may say, I don't need a piece of meat, but I'll eat more protein through plant proteins, not animal proteins. Although they are not the same, they are not far from one another. They are close, animal protein and plant protein. So because they are more serious from the farms, I'll substitute for some time till the situation improves. Okay, the last one, because we don't have all the time, is identification. It's a defense mechanism, according to Sigmund Freud, whereby a person takes on the qualities of another person to reduce the fear and anxiety toward that person. So it's a person taking on the qualities of another to reduce the fear and anxiety. You have read the book by a Russian writer, Nikolai Gogol, where they talk of government inspector, where the man who comes in that playbook as the government inspector was not the actual inspector. So there is the issue of identification. There are times when the real government inspector is not the one we are having. There are times when the reality is not yet there. We are not yet to the reality. Those are matters of identification. And sometimes we can impersonate. There are times we can camouflage. Particularly during the war, Mau Mau War, there were people camouflaging as the senior police officers for the government in order to do harm, or the other way around. In order to capture those in the forest, you pretend to be one of the Mau Maus and know their secrets. All that. These are the psychological disorders. One of it is identification. It's a disorder in what Sigmund Freud will talk about defense mechanism, one of the 9. Now, according to Sigmund Freud now, concerning the role of a counselor, Sigmund Freud sees the role of a counselor, a good counselor, is to encourage the development of transference. That is, giving the client a sense of safety and acceptance. The client freely explores difficult material and experiences from their past, gaining insight and working through unresolved issues. The counselor thus is an expert who interprets for the client. Yeah, we said a counselor has to be trained. That's why we are here. But again, we agreed, those who are here from the very beginning, that a counselor is not supposed to be deciding for anyone. He's only a facilitator who asks, not in the Socratic questioning that we noted in critical thinking, but rather in another level, but questioning and asking questions that will prompt or will facilitate and or guide this person to think and decide for himself. So you are facilitating somebody to solve his own problem. Yes, to clean his own house and be whole again. So you explore the difficult material and experiences from their past, sometimes gaining insights and working through unresolved issues. We can still poke critic to this and say what he has ignored. If you remember, we talked about 14 therapies. When we talked about those 14 therapies, we said quite a number of things to show that you cannot work with one theory, one idea. Sometimes you may require what we call hybrid, or a combination of 2 or 3 of them, depending on the situation. Sometimes you may just work with one. So the issue is, sometimes you may not need, as Sigmund Freud is saying, you may not necessarily need to dig into the historical background of this person. Some things may be very current. Some things may not need you to appear like you are trying to unveil and dig into certain issues. And again, we also don't like to make the counselor appear like an expert from heaven, but like one of us, a person whom the client feels at home with. But because this person is educated, this person can easily help this worried man, this troubled woman, to get through, to cope with the situation. Sometimes we are not able to cope. Now, Sigmund Freud would talk about the goals of therapy, which he says that they include A, helping the client bring into the conscious the unconscious. B, helping the client work through a developmental stage that was not resolved, or where the client became fixated. When you are fixated, you are there. As we talked about in critical thinking, functional fixation. You are fixed in a certain school of thought, in a certain idea. You can't move. Yes, so this fellow is just trying to help you, this counselor is trying to help you as counselee, though you prefer to call them clients, to get out of that fixation. Move from where you are and try to get the solution yourself. You get it. The other goal of therapy, according to Sigmund Freud, is help the client adjustment to the demands of work, intimacy, and society. Now, the last section is techniques in Sigmund Freud psychoanalytic theory. A is free association, which is a process where the client verbalizes any thoughts that may come without censorship, no matter how trivial the thoughts or feeling may be to the client. B, dream analysis is a process where the client relates their dreams to the counselor. The counselor interprets the obvious or manifest content and the hidden meanings or latent content. Latent is what is not intended, but manifest is what is intended. So in the course of the counseling, there are intended things that come up, and the work of this expert, this counselor, is to make you see those areas through friendly, not as I have heard of criminal psychologists, pushing somebody in a very criminal way, that is not necessarily the way. I would rather you make this person get to you through proper analysis. There is also analysis of transference, which is a process where the client is encouraged to attribute to counselor those issues that have caused difficulties with significant authority figures in their lives. The counselor helps the client to gain insight by the conflicts and feelings expressed. D is analysis of resistance. It is a process. As a technique, it is still a process where the counselor helps the client to gain insight into what causes form the basis for a hesitation or halting of therapy. So you can also, so I've said it's a process, analysis of resistance, where the counselor, you help this client to gain insight, to make him understand where she was or is. Sometimes the people who need counseling are those who lose insight. And it is very easy to lose insight. Even when you're doing business, you can easily lose insight. If the proprietor has died or has been transferred and you are left in that office, you may not know, you may have lost sight of it, yet you are still reading. Okay? So I've said, in this analysis, therefore, the counselor will help the client to gain insight into what causes form the basis for a hesitation or halting of therapy. The last one, interpretation, is a process where the counselor helps the client to gain insight into past and present events. Unless there's any comment on Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory, we may move to another one, or we may have a short break.